At 25 years old, Sylvia Green was very accustomed to the luxury and wealth she had lived in since birth. Her mother died when she was 7 years old, but her father did everything in his power to ensure that his beloved daughter never lacked anything. Lance Green had always been a determined man, and after graduating from university, he directed all his efforts toward developing his own business. By the age of 29, he had already made his first million, and 13 years later, he had multiplied his wealth several times over. But while he focused on investments and profit margins, Mr. Green had to rely on various helpers who worked in the family home over the years to raise his daughter. Sylvia ended up not being very close to her father emotionally, but she knew she lived very comfortably. What her father did, she didn't really understand and wasn't very interested in either. She just knew it brought in enough money to maintain her entire lifestyle. As a result, she never learned to respect her father's business. When she came of age, all she knew how to do efficiently was spend the money her father earned, a significant amount that had been built up through years of meticulous work. Of course, Lance Green tried to persuade his daughter to change her lifestyle, to learn something about the family business, and perhaps even take on a responsible position there, but the right time to teach certain values to the girl had already passed. Now, it had become very difficult to change the way Sylvia viewed reality and life's difficulties, because, to be honest, she hadn't faced many difficulties up to that point. Everything was resolved either with the help of one of the household staff or with her father's money. Sylvia could make an amount equal to a lawyer or manager's monthly salary disappear in just one visit to a shoe store. Moreover, the young woman didn't seem the least bit ashamed of flaunting or squandering her father's money. On social media, she had several followers who wanted to follow her daily life of luxury and extravagance. And this was a perfect excuse she gave herself to continue living in that empty and frivolous way. But Lance Green grew tired of trying to talk to his daughter and seeing no change. So, he decided to arrange a marriage for her with the son of a congressman, which would strengthen his position in business and give him reliable political support from his influential son-in-law. It was on an April night that Mr. Green approached his daughter about this matter. "Sylvia, you know I'm not young anymore, and business drains my energy. I want to make sure you will always have everything you need in life until your last days," he told her. Sylvia was perplexed. Besides not understanding what her father really meant, it seemed like he knew he was going to die or fall ill in the coming days or months. Then, looking deeply into his daughter's eyes, Mr. Green gathered his strength and hopes and got straight to the point. He said he wanted her to get married and that he had already found the perfect match, a politician. Sylvia thought her father was joking or going crazy, but he kept arguing, and then she realized he was serious. Things had gone too far for Sylvia. She knew John Montgomery. He was the son of one of her father's partners, but Sylvia and John were never friends, and she had never considered the possibility that this man could one day be her husband. She didn't know what to say to her father. Her lack of reaction and words were understood by Mr. Green as acceptance of the proposal, and then the father started making calls and working that same day to ensure his plan was fulfilled. The first person Lance Green spoke to was his partner, Mr. Montgomery, John's father, who also thought the proposal was wonderful. The Montgomery family business would also be in a better position with this union of their children. The wedding planning was a long and meticulous process. As usual, Sylvia Green left all the responsibility for the organization to her father and the people he appointed for the task. The hired wedding planner even commented that she had never worked on such a fancy wedding without the bride herself participating. So she prayed that all the decisions made by her and the team would please Sylvia. They rented the best hotel in town for the union and hired a Greek chef to handle all the food that would be served to the guests. When the wedding day arrived, the entire local elite gathered there. John Montgomery, the groom, had already taken his place at the altar, and the guests were eagerly awaiting the bride's grand entrance. They glanced at their watches occasionally and cast curious looks toward the back of the hall, expecting the doors to open at any moment and announce Sylvia Green's presence. But time passed, and there was no sign of the bride. The guests didn't understand what could be causing such a delay. Lance Green had lived that day intensely. He hadn't thought of anything other than the wedding of his only daughter to the heir of his friend and partner's fortune. But Mr. Green hadn't achieved his success by chance. He knew how to identify a crisis. When the delay became too noticeable, and neither he nor any of his staff could contact Sylvia by phone. The businessman realized he was involved in a scandal in front of the entire financial elite of the city. "I'll be honest with you, Lance. I didn't expect such behavior from your daughter. Can you imagine what people will think of me now?" said Mr. Montgomery, making a tremendous effort not to insult his friend right then and there. Lance Green was furious, but he didn't let it show. He understood that the responsibility for all this disgrace was entirely his. After all, he had arranged this marriage and made all the preparations. His daughter, as usual, would have no accountability to all those people who were left standing in the hotel hall. When he returned home, the father found Sylvia sleeping soundly in her room as if it had been just another day. It was obvious that the young woman didn't care about the damage she had caused to her father's reputation. The fact was that Sylvia had no idea how her life would change from that point on. That night, Lance Green stayed in his office until nearly midnight, analyzing all possible options for how to contain or correct his daughter's completely reprehensible and spoiled behavior. Mr. Green understood that anything he had done before would have been ineffective because, unfortunately, he had lost his position of authority in her life and mind. Before going to bed, the businessman made the only decision he deemed right for the moment. He knew it would drastically change Sylvia's life, but after what she had done, he saw no other way out. He would have to show her, once and for all, that she, like no other person on the face of the earth, could do whatever she wanted without facing consequences. The next morning, Sylvia was still sleeping, as usual, when her father woke up and tried to talk to her. Unsuccessful, he left the house and called her later, forcing the young woman to wake up. Annoyed, Sylvia put the phone to her ear and didn't have time to express her dissatisfaction to her father. "Daughter," Mr. Green began, "I'm going on a long business trip. I have no idea when I'll be back, but that doesn't matter now. What you need to know is that all your credit cards have been canceled for the time being. I bought you a house in Nebraska. That's where you'll be living for a while. Your security guard has already received instructions, and today you'll be moving to your new home." Mr. Green abruptly hung up the phone before his daughter had a chance to say anything. Sylvia then tried to call her father back, but couldn't reach him. Either the call wouldn't go through, or the phone rang until the time ran out. But Sylvia wasn't too worried. After all, what were the chances of her father taking such drastic action? She thought it was just another one of his threats. Nothing new in their relationship. Sylvia was fully aware of the trouble she had caused by not attending her own wedding and knew it would provoke her father's fury. But she thought that a few days would pass, and soon he would be calm again. Everything would go back to the way it was before. Sylvia planned to stay in bed a little longer, maybe even sleep a bit more. However, her plans were interrupted by a knock on the door, full of weight and authority. It was the mansion's security guard, informing Sylvia that she had only 30 minutes to get ready and that Mr. Green's orders were clear. If Sylvia didn't cooperate and pack her things, the guard had the authority to pack the woman's bags himself, choosing what he thought was best for her to take to Nebraska. "Does he really think I'm going to live on a farm?" Sylvia screamed in fury. The security guard entered and demanded her cooperation, in a tone that he had never used with her before. He said he had orders from Mr. Green to follow, and he was his boss, not her. After all, she didn't even have any active credit cards at the moment. Sylvia realized that this time her father was serious and decided to cooperate, but she felt deeply resentful. It took about 6 hours to reach the house in Nebraska. When they arrived at the farm, Sylvia was already quite tired. During the journey, she had prayed that it was all just a prank, a scare orchestrated by her father. However, as the car continued down the road, she saw that they were indeed heading somewhere in Nebraska far from shopping centers, luxury stores, and urban civilization. When she saw the house her father had arranged, Sylvia wanted to run. But since there was nowhere to run in those vast farm fields, she had to accept everything in silence. The house chosen by Mr. Green wasn't very large, and the passage of time was evident in its paint and fixtures. The security guard didn't waste a minute, and as soon as he got out of the vehicle, he began carrying the woman's bags into the house. He said he had much more to do for his employer and hoped to get home before nightfall. When the car turned the corner on the dirt road and sped toward the highway, Sylvia realized that this was no prank and no scare from her father. It was for real. She had crossed the line and was left to her own devices in a place she could only describe as horrible and forgotten by God. She felt empty inside and sad. She wanted to cry, but her pride wouldn't let her. In fact, what she was feeling was pure anger, like she hadn't felt since she was a child. As soon as she opened the front door, Sylvia noticed that the house was even worse inside. All the furniture was old and covered with a thick layer of dust. There were cobwebs in the corners of the walls. In certain spots, as she walked, the wooden floor creaked. It would take at least a month to clean everything, but she had to start. After all, she would need to sleep and eat there unless a miracle happened. For a young woman who had never had to use a broom, mop, and cleaning products for more than 5 minutes in her life, cleaning that house was an exhausting and complex task. She only took breaks to drink water and eat some snacks she had brought from the mansion. Even when she ate, it was with anxiety because of the anger she felt, which somehow gave the spoiled young woman the strength to continue the task. Sylvia only calmed down around midnight when she finally saw the house reasonably clean and minimally habitable. She was so tired that she simply couldn't find the energy to make any more food for herself. So, she went to bed with an empty stomach. The next morning, Sylvia was awakened by a mysterious knock on the door. She had no idea who it could be. She felt weak and hungry. When she opened the door, she saw a frail-looking elderly woman standing there holding a basket. "Hello, dear," said the woman. "My name is Teresa Alvin. I'm your neighbor and brought some food because I know there's nothing in this house." Sylvia smiled at the woman, who seemed very friendly and calm. The young woman didn't know what to do, but she ended up taking the basket the elderly woman had brought and invited her in. Teresa saw the clean floors and imagined how much time and effort that girl must have invested in cleaning everything. They sat on the only sofa in the small living room and talked. Teresa knew Sylvia would be there for a long time and that she would need a job to support herself. Sylvia was shaken. Up until that moment in her life, she had never held any job. What was this woman trying to say? With great tact, Teresa explained that the area where she now lived needed someone to deliver the mail and thought Sylvia could take the job. The young woman didn't know what to say and thought for a minute. Her father seemed serious about not helping her with anything. Her credit cards were useless, and her house had no supplies, except for the basket Teresa had brought out of sheer generosity. Sylvia had no idea how it would work, but she felt obligated to accept the offer. Being a mail carrier turned out to be an easier job than Sylvia had imagined. She would need to go to a specific post in the region to pick up the mail and then deliver it throughout the village area. There weren't many houses around, but they were somewhat far apart, as there were many farms and ranches. In the first week, it took her an entire day to cover the whole area. She couldn't quite navigate the region's dirt roads, as they all looked the same at first. But Sylvia didn't give up, feeling she needed the money the job would bring. Gradually, she got the hang of the work, and in just one morning, she could deliver all the mail. She had never received a letter and didn't know what it felt like. Working in Nebraska, she discovered how people truly felt when they received a letter from a loved one or about an important matter, and also how they could become nervous and irritated when the news wasn't good or when taxes increased. Realizing that her work was useful to those people made Sylvia feel good about herself. One day, as she passed by one of the houses in the area, the young woman noticed something strange in the window. Sylvia's attention was drawn to a girl about 7 years old, standing on the windowsill. The young woman ran to the house without hesitation. What she saw inside left her stunned. The floor was almost completely covered with empty beer bottles and cigarette butts. It looked like the house hadn't had a good cleaning in months. Sylvia walked carefully around the trash and approached the girl on the windowsill. She told her to stay calm as she hugged her to take her out of the dangerous situation. There was no one in the house except for the child, so she decided to take her to her own home. The girl's name was Jane Long, and when she asked Teresa about the girl, she learned that her mother's name was Carolyn Long and that she was raising her alone. There were rumors that Carolyn had gotten pregnant by a truck driver who used to pass through the town transporting cattle. The woman had a reputation for liking to drink and being seen at noisy parties in the area. Sylvia hugged the girl. Teresa said she would ask the other residents if anyone had any idea where Carolyn was, but at that moment, the best thing to do was to call the police. Apparently, Jane hadn't eaten in a long time. Bread, fruit, milk, and a snack provided by Teresa were devoured almost instantly by the girl. Sylvia couldn't believe she had found the girl alone and abandoned. Her eyes welled up with emotion. What if she hadn't passed by the house? What would have happened to the child? When Jane seemed satisfied, Sylvia put her in an extra bed in Teresa's house. Soon after, Sylvia went to the local police station and explained the situation. The officer who handled the case was a determined and friendly young man named Andrew, who offered to help. The first thing Andrew did was put Carolyn, Jane's mother, on the missing persons list and issue a notice to the state's police stations about her disappearance. Carolyn Long was found 12 days later, living in a house up north with 2 other men. When they arrived, the police quickly realized that the woman was under the influence of drugs. The abandonment and drug use were certainly reason enough for the state of Nebraska to take custody of the girl from her mother and place her in an orphanage. When Officer Andrew told Sylvia this, the green heiress was stunned. She had lived with Jane for all those days and had grown attached to the girl. Moreover, she thought it would be an unfair end for an innocent child who had no control over her mother's vices. To Sylvia, Jane was already like a younger sister. As soon as the officer left her house, Sylvia went to Teresa's house and said, in a determined tone, that she wanted to adopt Jane. The elderly woman was taken aback but liked the idea. "You're doing the right thing, dear," she said. "It won't be easy for Jane. She'll miss her mother, but she doesn't deserve an orphanage." In 3 months, Sylvia had obtained custody of Jane. Sylvia began delivering mail to more distant districts as well, so she could earn a better salary to meet the girl's needs. Teresa was always around and helped whenever she could. Even Andrew occasionally stopped by to see if everything was going well since he had followed the case from the beginning. Teresa suspected that the officer was interested in the young woman, but Sylvia had many other things on her mind at the moment and was truly dedicated to them. It was as if she no longer remembered the past when she was nothing more than a spoiled girl and the daughter of a millionaire. But one day, after returning home from delivering all the mail in 3 different districts and hugging Jane, Sylvia was surprised by the arrival of a Mercedes. It had been months since she had thought about it, but when she saw the car parked, she knew who was there after so long without news. But Sylvia didn't feel resentful or angry. Now, she was happy. She took Jane by the hand and ran out shouting, "Daddy?" Already out of the car, Mr. Green looked astonished. It was definitely not the reception he expected. Sylvia hugged him tightly and asked Jane to hug Grandpa too. The millionaire didn't know what to believe. Was it true that his daughter was being affectionate after so long? His eyes filled with tears, and he hugged his daughter and the little girl. He kissed Sylvia's forehead and hair, moved. He realized that leaving her to live on a remote farm had undoubtedly changed her perception of life and reality. However, Mr. Green also realized that he had made a mistake by trying to arrange a marriage for her. Without Sylvia expecting it, he looked deep into her eyes and said, "My daughter, I'm sorry." Hugging each other, the 3 entered the small house. They were a family again. Sylvia was finally ready to return to the city if she wanted to. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a like, and the other video that's now appearing on the screen will probably move you as well. Enjoy the session, and see you in the next video.